Welcome back, CHP listeners from all over the world. Laszlo Montgomery here with part 2 of a series that, well, despite the vast amount of esoterica surrounding it, will explore the history of Chinese medicine. My deepest thanks for tuning in. After so many hours upon hours of slogging through books, academic papers, documentaries, and whatnot, I must admit, if there's one thing you could say about the ancient physicians of the Zhou period, no one is in agreement with who they were, what they wrote, and in some cases, if these people ever lived at all. Last episode, we looked at some of the names of the most famous of these physicians of antiquity: Yi He, physician He; Qin Yue Ren, better known as Bian Que. We also looked at Chun Yu Yi, Hua Tuo, Zhang Zhongjing, and Huang Fu Mi. These and other physicians were the ones who played the pioneering roles in transitioning Chinese medicine away from spirits and the supernatural to something more science and empirical based. I also mentioned the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, the Huangdi Neijing, and said a few things about that most celebrated of all texts dealing with TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. But as I said before, I wanted to focus on the Huangdi Neijing in this episode, and we'll look at a few more of the ancients as well. The Huangdi Neijing is made up of two parts: the plain questions, or Su Wen, and the efficacious pivot, or the spiritual pivot, the Lingshu Jing. Each book has 9 volumes with 9 sections per volume for a total of 81 chapters. 81 in the Su Wen and 81 in the Lingshu brought the number up to 162 sections between the two books that make up the Yellow Emperor's inner canon. And in the Su Wen, there are the 2 missing chapters of 72 and 73. We know of their titles, but those 2, for reasons we can only speculate, are not available. The Su Wen was first mentioned by Ban Gu, compiler, along with his sister Ban Zhao, of the Book of Han. He was also the twin brother of the military great Ban Chao, scourge of the Xiongnu. Among other conquests, Ban Chao brought the oases of the Tarim Basin under Han Dynasty control. Ban Gu mentioned the Su Wen as part of the Qi Yi Jing, or the 7 classics of medicine. Ban Gu mentioned the Su Wen, but not the Lingshu. This part of the Huangdi Neijing was also referred to as the Zhenjing, the classic of needles, meaning acupuncture, the primary subject discussed in the Lingshu. As far as who wrote it and when, believe it or not, scholars disagree on when the contents of the book were written. The consensus is that it was definitely not written any earlier than the late 4th century BC, in the final 100 years of the Warring States period. But most scholars in the know will tell you what we read today was compiled during the Western Han by the scholars of that time. All of the vague concepts developed during the Zhou came into much sharper focus during the Han, particularly the later Han. One thing's for sure, and most everyone agrees on this: it wasn't written by the Yellow Emperor, nor by one single person. Sima Qian never mentioned this work. The Yellow Emperor's inner canon kept getting revised and polished in the Sui and Tang dynasties as well, and we'll get to Wang Bing and his important work on the Huangdi Neijing in Part 3. The Yellow Emperor had nothing to do with the writing of this text. However, the gravitas behind his name, as well as his legendary and traditional association with medicine and healthy living, were already widespread. Therefore, attributing this text to someone the likes of the Yellow Emperor gave the work some heft. And the same could be said about Shannong's Materia Medica. The book has been described as an amalgamation of all the known accumulated knowledge from the many scientists and physicians going back to the Shang Dynasty. It contains the fundamental principles of traditional Chinese medicine. The Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, is the earliest complete extant Chinese medical theoretical work. It explained the relationship and connection between Tian, Di and Ren, heaven, earth, and humankind. Let me just interject here about one small thing. I often call these medical texts books. Well, they weren't books like we know. They were all compilations of scrolls. Bookbinding, although it had its earliest beginnings in the Han, didn't really start to happen until the Tang. The Huangdi Neijing not only discusses treatment and causes of diseases, but also how to maintain proper health. Very detailed answers are given as to how to maintain one's total wellness. But essentially what the Yellow Emperor's inner canon hammers home is for people to maintain an inner balance by avoiding all excesses, and this included excessive emotions. The Huangdi Neijing was where it was first postulated that climate, internal emotions, living habits, and diet were directly related to a person's wellness. It was only in the Han Dynasty where they first began to insist diseases weren't caused by evil or malevolent spirits. It was good living habits that mattered, including healthy eating and exercise. The Huangdi Neijing is more than a medical manual. It's also a book of astronomy, philosophy, geography, biology, and other observations, and sort of acts as a timestamp for the state of the art in Chinese medicine at the time it was compiled. When you pick up a copy and peruse it, you'll see the Huangdi Neijing takes the form of discussions between the Yellow Emperor and his officials, ministers, and fellow medical colleagues, most famously Qi Bo. Others were Gui Yu Qu, Bo Gao, Shao Yu, and the thunder god, Lei Gong. Qi Bo is the most consequential of them all and appears most often in the Yellow Emperor's many discourses contained in the Su Wen of the Inner Canon. He was entirely mythical. Qi Bo was someone who was introduced to the Yellow Emperor and became not only his physician, but also chancellor of his government. And he's considered the first one who said when yin and yang were not in harmony, illness happened. He knew all about the need for equilibrium and harmony. Qi Bo's specialty was medicinal herbs and the understanding of Jing Luo. This is another thing mentioned last time in part 1, but I was going to save this aspect of Chinese medicine for now. Jing Luo means the network of main and collateral channels or meridians in the body through which all qi flows. Jing Luo is an abbreviation of Jing Mai and Luo Mai. The Jing Mai were the channels or meridians where qi circulated, and in the process, regulated all bodily functions. And the Luo Mai were the collaterals which connected the channels. They were the branches of the Jing Mai channels. And like I said, collectively, they're called the Jing Luo. These channels or meridians don't physically exist like your blood vessels and nervous system. Think of them as virtual channels where qi energy flows. Scientists and TCM experts have engaged in a long, protracted, and vigorous debate over the existence of these meridians, as they're described in the ancient Chinese texts. Whether they do or not, what's important to know is that they are central to not only acupuncture, but to the entirety of traditional Chinese medicine as well. I'm guessing you've all seen those anatomical charts showing all the meridians. They appear as a kind of central nervous system overlaid onto a human body. These meridian channels connect the surface of the body with the internal organs, allowing qi to flow freely. And there are 6 meridians on each side of your body, 12 in total. Again, these 12 are called the Jing Mai, or standard or principal meridians. Each of the 12 are either yin or yang in their nature. Each is associated with one of your extremities, that is, either your hand or your foot, as well as one of the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. And there's also an association with a particular internal organ. I know, starting from scratch, this is all hard to get your arms around, but I hope you can get an appreciation of the big picture as far as how Chinese medicine began to coalesce around these main ideas that included yin and yang, qi, the 5 elements, and the meridians. And from this, we can see how the ancients understood the human body through their understanding of these concepts and how they placed it within the eternal rhythms of the earth and nature. If you're a TCM practitioner, you're probably shaking your head and thinking, what an oversimplification. And to someone hearing about this for the first time, you might be thinking, there's a lot to take in. If no one has ever picked up a copy of the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, the Huangdi Neijing, let me read a few excerpts from the version I have, given to me as a gift from longtime listener and now close friend Clement. This is the Paul Unscholt and Hermann Tessenow translation of the text. Paul Unscholt is a respected name in the scholarship of TCM based in Berlin, and Hermann Tessenow is a senior lecturer at the Institute for the History of Medicine at Munich University. Their version, as far as I've been able to surmise, is very highly regarded. So that's the source I'll be quoting from. I thought the best place to start would be the most quoted part of the Huangdi Neijing. This is an excerpt from the opening chapter 1, The Universal Truth, where Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, is conferring with Qi. He opens by asking, quote, I have heard that the people of high antiquity all exceeded 100 years, but in their movements and activities there was no weakening. As for the people of today, after 1/2 of 100 years, the movements and activities of all of them weaken. Is this because the times are different, or is it that people have lost this ability? Qi responded, the people of high antiquity, those who knew the Tao, they modeled their behavior on yin and yang, and they complied with the arts and the calculations. Their eating and drinking was moderate, their rising and resting had regularity. They did not tax themselves with meaningless work. Hence, they were able to keep physical appearance and spirit together and exhaust the years allotted to them by heaven. The fact that people of today are different is because they take wine as an ordinary beverage, and they adopt absurd behavior as regular behavior. They are drunk when they enter the women's chambers. Through their lust, they exhaust their essence, and through their wastefulness, they dissipate their true qi. End quote. And then regarding the aging process of females compared to males, the Yellow Emperor asked Qi, quote, when someone is old in years and no longer has children, is it that his strength is exhausted, or is it that the heavenly numbers are such? Qi replied, in a female at the age of 7, the qi of the kidneys abounds, the first teeth are substituted, and the hair grows long. With 2 times 7, meaning 14 years, the heavenly gui arrives. The controlling vessel is passable, and the great thoroughfare vessel abounds with qi. The monthly affair moves down in due time, and hence a woman may have children. With 3 times 7, meaning 21 years of age, according to my multiplication table cheat sheet, the qi of the kidneys has reached its normal level. Hence the wisdom teeth emerge and females grow to their full size. With 4 times 7, the sinews and bones are firm, and the hair has grown to its fullest extent. The body and the limbs are in a state of abundance and strength. With 5 times 7, the yang brilliance vessels weakens. The face begins to dry out. The hair begins to fall off. With 6 times 7, the 3 yang vessels weaken in the upper sections. The face is all parched. The hair begins to turn white. With 7 times 7, the controlling vessel is depleted, and the great thoroughfare vessel is weak, and its contents are diminished. The heavenly gui is exhausted. End quote. Then Qi tells the Yellow Emperor of the male characteristics, quote, in a male at the age of 8, the qi of the kidneys is replete. His hair grows, and his initial teeth are substituted. With 2 times 8, meaning 16 years of age, the qi of the kidneys abounds, the heavenly gui arrives, and the essence of qi flows away. Yin and yang find harmony. Hence, he can have children. With 3 times 8, the qi of the kidneys has reached its normal level. The sinews and bones are firm and strong. Hence, the wisdom teeth emerge, and men grow to their full size. With 4 times 8, the sinews and the bones prosper in abundance. The muscles and flesh are full and strong. With 5 times 8, the qi of the kidneys weakens, the hair falls off, and the teeth wither. With 6 times 8, the yang qi weakens and is exhausted in the upper sections. The face dries out, and the hair on the head and on the temples shows streaks of white. With 7 times 8, the qi in the liver weakens. The sinews can no longer move. The heavenly gui is exhausted. The remaining essence is diminished. The kidney depot is weak, and the physical body is completely exhausted. With 8 times 8, the teeth and hair go. The kidneys rule the water. They receive the essence from the 5 depots and 6 palaces, and they store it. Hence, when there is abundance in the 5 depots, essence can flow away. At this age, now the 5 depots are all weak, and the sinews and the bones have become sluggish. The heavenly gui is used up entirely. Hence, the hair on the head and on the temples turns white, and the body and the limbs are heavy. A male of that age no longer walks upright and no longer has children." End quote. The discourse on this matter between Qi Bo continues with the Yellow Emperor remarking, quote, "It happens that someone who is already old in years nevertheless has children. How can that be?" Qi Bo replied, "In this case, the lifespan allotted by heaven exceeds the norm. The qi passes through the vessels as usual, and the qi of the kidneys has a surplus. Although someone has children, males do not exceed the end reached at 8 times 8, meaning 64 years of age, and females do not exceed the end reached at 7 times 7, or 49 years of age, when the essence qi of heaven and earth are all exhausted." End quote. This well-known passage from the Yellow Emperor's inner canon continued in the same vein with Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, querying Qi Bo on these matters of the physical nature of humans. He asked, quote, "Now, those who follow the Tao, they all reach a number of 100 years. Can they have children?" Qi Bo replied, "Those who follow the Tao, they can drive away old age, and they preserve their physical appearance. Although their body has lived a long life, they are still able to produce children." End quote. There's more to the chapter, but here I'm only reading a few excerpts to give you a taste of the Huangdi Neijing. Chinese scholars have had 2,000 years to pick it apart, analyze the archaic classical Chinese writing and all the commentaries in order to uncover the meanings behind these sentences. There are so many characters in the text that are no longer used in the modern Chinese written language, and the Yellow Emperor's inner canon is filled with such characters. So even in the Han, Jin, and into the Sui and Tang, quite a bit of educated guesswork was used to coax out the exact meaning behind this most important of texts of Chinese medicine. It was easy to misunderstand the intended meaning of some characters, and some of these misunderstandings went on for centuries before revisions were made. The Huangdi Neijing also says that human emotions can also affect specific organs. Too much anger, for example, damages the liver. Too much anxiety isn't good for your spleen. Too much joy will damage the heart. And too much melancholy, the lungs. Too much fear will cause damage to the kidneys. This was all in line with the holism that pervaded Chinese medicine. It was concerned with all aspects of the patient's well-being as one single unit, not just their physical condition. When psychological and social pressures had an impact on human health. The Huangdi Neijing takes all of this into consideration. Practitioners and believers in holistic medicine are surely nodding their heads in agreement. This is the main core principle of holistic medicine that says the body, mind, and spirit are all interconnected. And the key to physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being is maintaining a harmonious balance of all aspects of one's life. Many of those who misunderstand this concept think it's some modern-day newfangled health fad, but it's been practiced in China, as we can see, since the beginnings of Chinese civilization. Throughout the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, the so-called 12 depots are constantly referred to. In Chinese, we call them the 12 storage organs, or 12 Last time I mentioned in part 1 the Zangfu organs, the 5 Zang and the 6 Fu organs. In my copy of the Huangdi Neijing, the pericardium, or Xinbao, is mentioned as a 6th Zang organ. And these 6 and the 6 Fu organs comprise these 12 depots. And each organ plays a critical and unique role in the regulation and storage of qi. Let me repeat once more with feeling. The Zang organs, these are the liver that governs the flow of qi and blood throughout the body. The heart, as written by Paul Unshold and Hermann Tessenow, is the emperor of the body, responsible for housing the shun, or spirit, and controlling blood circulation. It's associated with emotions, consciousness, and mental well-being. The spleen is responsible for the transformation and transportation of food and nutrients, playing a key role in digestion and the production of qi and blood. The lungs govern qi and respiration and are associated with the regulation of defensive qi that protects the body from external pathogens. The kidneys, as we saw from that excerpt from Chapter 1 of the Su Wen of the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, are extremely important. They are considered the root of yin and yang, and they store the essence, which is essential for development, reproduction, and overall vitality. Those are the 5 Zang, but as I just said, there is also a 6th one, and that is the pericardium, also known as the heart protector, which assists the heart in its role and protects it from emotional disturbances. The 6 Fu organs are the gallbladder, small intestine, stomach, large intestine, bladder, and the so-called sanjiao, or triple burner. I explained they don't introduce it in med school this way, but in TCM training, this triple burner is responsible for regulating the distribution of fluids in the body into upper, middle, and lower burners, which correspond to the chest, abdomen, and pelvis, respectively. So understanding all the aspects of these 12 depots, these 12 organs, and how they all interact with each other is a concept fundamental to TCM diagnosis and treatment. Let me just read one more excerpt, this one from Chapter 8 of the Su Wen, called Discourse on the Hidden Canons in the Numinous Orchid. I also saw it written as the confidential collections in the Royal Library about the functions of the 12 viscera, if that gives you any idea about how much leeway there is between the various interpretations and English translations of this text. The Yellow Emperor started by asking Chibo, quote, I should like to hear how the 12 depots engage each other and what is their hierarchy. Chibo responded, An encompassing question indeed. Please let me speak about them one by one. The heart is the official, functioning as ruler. Spirit brilliance originates in it. The lung is the official, functioning as chancellor and mentor. Order and moderation originate in it. The liver is the official, functioning as general. Planning and deliberation originate in it. The gallbladder is the official, functioning as rectifier. Decisions and judgments originate in it. The danzhong is the official, functioning as minister and envoy. Joy and happiness originate in it. End quote. According to Wang Bing, who we'll look at in Part 3, the danzhong is the region in the chest between the two breasts. Continuing on, quote, The spleen and the stomach are the officials responsible for grain storage. The 5 flavors originate from them. The large intestine is the official functioning as transmitter along the way, meaning the dao. Changes and transformations originate in it. The small intestine is the official functioning as recipient of what has been perfected. The transformation of things originates in it. The kidneys are the official functioning as operator with force. Technical skills and expertise originate from them. The triple burner is the official functioning as opener of channels. The paths of water originate in it. The urinary bladder is the official functioning as regional rectifier. The body liquids are stored in it. All of these 12 officials must not lose contact with each other." End quote. So as I've illustrated, other than interesting reading, the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, in translation that is, through the discourses between Huangdi and his trusty official Qibo, lays out the fundamentals and details of the human body and human wellness in the TCM environment. Translators of the classical Chinese original texts have taken it in multiple directions, but I think you could get the main idea. Again, these translations were all taken from the Paul Unscholt and Herman Tessenow translations that came out on University of California Press in 2011. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. The explanatory notes that accompany the texts are even more numerous than the actual translation itself. You've heard me mention this a number of times in many past episodes. In 1973, inside the number 3 tomb at Huangdi, they discovered all these medical texts. These Huangdi texts are believed to have been written before the final received version of the Huangdi Neijing. One other very noteworthy find inside this tomb from 168 BC was the 52 diseases and formulas, the 52 Bingfang, a discovery that further showed, even as far back as the time of Emperor Wen in the Han Dynasty, all kinds of diseases and cures were already understood, and effective treatments had already been devised. The 52 Bingfang, written during the Qin on silk and bamboo slips, lists 242 drugs, all derived from plants, animals, and minerals. Many of these were not even mentioned in Shennong's Materia Medica. Collectively, these 10 medical texts discovered in the tombs at Huangdi, near present-day Changsha in Hunan, and on display there at the Hunan Provincial Museum, written on both silk scrolls and bamboo slips, showed that already 394 ingredients had been identified and cataloged that contained proven pharmacological effects on the body. 180 herbs, 116 animal parts, 33 kinds of spices or prepared foods, 31 minerals, 12 vegetables, and 8 types of clothing, as well as a number of unidentifiable items were written about. A lot of these medical-related books were thought to have been lost, and as I think I mentioned, the Yellow Emperor's inner canon that China scholars had accepted as the official version was found to differ from the Huangdi version that predated the final text. To the north of the Huangdi discovery, there were 3 tombs unearthed from around 186 BC at Zhangjiashan, southern Hubei. This tomb, discovered in early 1984, came from the time of Empress Liu's regency. Who could forget her? It was a completely no-frills, vertical pit tomb. The inhabitant was no one of consequence, perhaps a court scribe, an official, or a scholar. It wasn't so much who he was, as much as it was what he was buried with. His tomb contained about 1,000 bamboo slips, 178 of them concerning medicine. There were prescriptions listing ingredients and dosages, anatomical drawings, and medical treatises. The most significant medical texts discovered at Zhangjiashan were the Wu Se Jing, that dealt with the relationship between eye color and a number of diseases, the 9 needles and the 12 meridians, 九针十二元, offered scholars and archaeologists additional knowledge about the 9 types of acupuncture needles and the 12 Jingmai principal meridians. The Book of Diseases, or Lingshu, was a general text on the causes, symptoms, and treatments for diseases, as well as surgical techniques. The Fengshu was another book on prescriptions. These and others discovered at Zhangjiashan gave a much sharper focus on what the state of the art was during the Western Han Dynasty. I've only read you excerpts from the Yellow Emperor and Qibo, but there were also a few other ministers or physicians who served the Yellow Emperor, and these were Gui Yuqi, Bo Gao, Shao Yu, and the thunder god, Lei Gong. Gui Yuqi was a native of Qi who lived during the spring and autumn period and was said to have been a student of Bian Que. Many other claims were made about the contributions to the foundational understanding of Chinese medicine, including acupuncture and herbal remedies. One of the greatest achievements ascribed to Gui Yuqi is the co-invention, along with the Yellow Emperor, of the theory of the 5 elements as a kind of philosophical concept that could classify and organize everything in the world and what its relationship was to human life. It provided scholars and philosophers with systemic order for everything in the world. It was incorporated into medicine around the spring and autumn period in order to explain human physiology and the principles of diagnosis and treatment. Gui Yuqi is also credited with the discovery of the pulses and the meridians. So by being referred to as one of the ministers of the Yellow Emperor, you could call Gui Yuqi one of the founding fathers, so to speak, of Chinese medicine. His student was Shao Yu, who, like all these Zhou Dynasty physicians, carries a whole lot of street cred as far as their contributions to the understanding of the 5 elements and yin and yang. But at the end of the day, nothing survives from this time that can confirm that he actually wrote these texts, or if they ever existed at all. There was also a work known as the Huangdi Neijing, or Yellow Emperor's Outer Canon. But alas, like I just said, this was another in a tragically long line of oft-mentioned Chinese medical texts lost to the ages. But as we could see from Ma Wangdui and Zhang Jiashan, you never know what might show up one day in the future in some as-yet undiscovered tomb. Bo Gao was another one of the mythical greats, another student of Bian Que. He was mentioned in the Shanhai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas. Bo Gao, like a lot of these Bronze Age noteworthy physicians, has a whole array of fantastical claims made about him. He was one of the earliest to name the Wu Zang and Liu Fu that we now know are also referred to as the 12 depots, or Shi Er Zang. Another mythical great was the thunder god Lei Gong. Among the multitude of myths associated with his life, it was written that he was a student of the Yellow Emperor and a skilled physician in his own right. Various skills and written texts were attributed to him. The Lei Gong Pao Zhi Lun, most famously, which discusses the processing methods for various medicinal substances and their effect on the body. He became a sort of a god who was worshipped not only by the sick, but by doctors as well. So these were also some of the most noteworthy names of celebrated doctors of ancient China who are recalled throughout the earliest centuries of Chinese medicine. Everything I presented comes straight from the Su Wen. You could say that this book of the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon deals more in the essential questions concerning anatomy, physiology, and other matters regarding human wellness. The other, even more nebulous part of the Huangdi Neijing is the Lingshu Jing, and I wanted to try and introduce it in the time remaining before they kick me out of this recording studio. Huang Fu Mi was one of the first, if not the first, of the ancients to mention the classic of needles, or Zhenjing. This lost text was mentioned in his Zhenjiu Jiayi Jing, If you recall from last episode, this was the Canon of acupuncture and moxibustion. Much of what appeared in the Classic of Needles can be found in this work by Huangdi Neijing. The Lingshu is concerned with the needles, the acupoints, channels, and needling techniques, and how to use acupuncture to treat certain conditions. The name Lingshu Jing doesn't appear until Wang Bing first mentioned it by that name during his time in the 8th century. And like I did for the Su Wen, I'm going to read just a couple excerpts from the Lingshu, only this time I'm going to feature the translations from the late Dr. Wu Jingnuan. This time I'll quote from his translation of The Spiritual Pivot, as this book is called. Well, that's one of the names. Like all these old Chinese texts, they go by a whole variety of names in English. This book is part of the Asian Spirituality Taoist Studies series from the University of Hawaii Press. Huangdi said to Qi Bo, quote, "I, the emperor of the people, receive revenues of rents and taxes to nourish the 100 families. But I am grieved by not being able to provide for those afflicted with disease. I wish they did not have to endure the poison of medicines and the use of stone probes. I prefer to use those fine needles which penetrate the channels, harmonize the blood and qi energy, manage the current and countercurrents, and assemble the exits and entrances. Please unravel this for future generations and enlighten them in the proper methods so this therapy will not be destroyed or severed for eons. See that it is easy to use, difficult to forget, a classical record. Begin with the fundamentals of classical acupuncture. I wish to hear of these essentials." End quote. Well, Qi Bo gave quite a lengthy reply that could be understood in any number of ways. In describing the Jiuzhen, or 9 needles, he said this, quote, "Each of the 9 needles has a name and a distinct shape. The first is called the chisel needle. The second is called the round needle. The third is called the spoon needle. The fourth is called the lance needle. The fifth is called the sword needle. The sixth is called the round and sharp needle. The seventh is called the hair fine needle. The eighth is called the long needle. The ninth is called the big needle." End quote. Qi Bo also noted the length of each needle in cun and fen. In days of yore, the Chinese cun inch was defined as the width of the thumb at the level of the cuticle, and 1 fen would be equal to 1/10 of a cun. The 8th needle was the longest, measuring 7 cun. As far as the application of each of the 9 individual needles, Qi Bo went on to describe them to the Yellow Emperor like this, quote, "The chisel needle has a big head with a sharp tip. It may be used to dispense yang qi. The round needle has the shape of an egg. It is used for rubbing and massage, to divide and to separate so as not to injure the muscles and flesh. It divides and dispenses the qi. The spoon needle has a point which is as sharp as a grain of millet. It controls the channels by touch, not by penetration, so as to bring about the qi. The lance needle has 3 cutting edges and may be used to affect chronic illnesses. The sword needle tip is like a sword. It may be used to press out large pustules. The round and sharp needle is as large as a tuft of hair. It is not round and sharp. The center of its body is a bit larger. Its use is to seize the abrupt, cruel qi. The hair fine needle has a tip like a mosquito or gadfly's beak. It can be inserted slowly and quietly and detained for a long time to nourish qi. It may be used also to reach the sickness of painful rheumatism. The long needle has a lance-like edge and a thin body, so it may be used to reach distant paralysis and deep rheumatism. The big needle is tipped like a stick, and its point is slightly round. It may be used to disperse water at the moving gates. These are the 9 needles." End quote. Most of the Lingshu Jing is heavy on the theoretical and philosophical rather than the practical advice presented in the Su Wen. But there's plenty of discussion on the fine points of acupuncture and moxibustion as well. There's extensive discussion on the body's meridian system and how the network is all assembled. Acupuncture techniques abound, as well as discourses on moxibustion, pulse diagnosis, and the Han Dynasty state-of-the-art as far as causes for certain diseases and specific treatments. The three core texts for Chinese medicine were the two books of the Huangdi Neijing, the Su Wen and the Lingshu, and Bianque's Nanjing, the classic of difficult problems, mentioned last time. There have been so many that I've mentioned, but these three, at least in the Han Dynasty and into the Tang, were the most sacred and referred to. The Lingshu, once again often referred to as the divine pivot, is the oldest guide to these so-called acupoints, or acupuncture or acupressure points, called xue. They're often referred to as loci, or loci, if you like the hard C version. When it was first compiled, it named 360 of these loci, and in the second book of the Huangdi Neijing, all the fundamentals are explained. In the coming episodes, we'll keep coming back to these core ancient texts, but I'd like to get beyond the Han Dynasty and look at the progress made in between the 1,000 years between the fall of the Han and the Song. And that's going to be the focus for next time in part 3. I know this is a lot of info that I've showered you with. I urge you to go to the website at teacup.media and refer to the list of Chinese names and terms used in this episode. Loyal listeners have been emailing me for years, telling me what a help that's been in keeping these Chinese names straight. My apologies for cutting and running here. If your head is spinning, trying to keep your 5 elements straight from your yin, yang, and qi, I give you my most solemn assurances. By the time this series comes to an end, you'll be the smartest one in the room, provided you keep your distance from any TCM practitioners. I'll be in Hong Kong, Dongguan, and Yantai by the time you hear this. So, until the next time we meet again on the Avenue, this is Laszlo Montgomery signing off from Shaky Town in the state of confusion, beseeching you to come back again next time for another therapeutic episode of the China History Podcast.